Welcome to your second bonus video, Calling a Circle. I believe it's difficult for people like us to take this first step of setting up time to interact in this way with the people of your nonprofit. Let me share with you something a friend of mine who was a therapist once said. She said, Nancy, if you don't put yourself on your own calendar, you won't take time for yourself. Those who choose to work in the nonprofit world are often type E folks, everything to everyone. Working in your silos aggravates this tendency to not take care of ourselves. Gift yourself the time to step back, to take a breath. If you step back to create teams, you will get more time and more support for what you do. There are many types of circles depending upon its purpose. You might have noticed on my website that I spent about 25 years working with Native American populations in South Dakota, and we use circles for everything, from federal criminal sentencing circles to building communities. I have even heard of a software developer that uses circle work to develop software and claims it cuts their production time by half. The type of circle you call is based upon your need for the circle. The questions you ask in your rounds will be determined by the purpose of your circle. This video is meant to supplement your storytelling mini course to better enable you to create and sustain a storytelling culture in your nonprofit. Therefore, the type of circle you are calling is a storytelling circle. There is language associated with calling a circle. So let's go through some of the language that you'll need to learn when you call a circle. Guidelines are promises that those in the circle make to each other about how they will conduct themselves in the circle. The purpose of the guidelines is to establish clear expectations for conduct, which are based upon the need to create a safe space to speak from your heart. So guidelines will include, for example, to engage in respectful speaking and listening, and often include a request to preserve confidentiality. I have included a handout of some common guidelines you can provide to participants who will join a circle. You can and should adapt the guidelines depending upon the type of circle. Note that the guidelines are titled Shared Agreements, which tells you that your people should decide upon the guidelines and then agree to them. All circles contain the same key elements. Those are rotating or shared leadership, shared responsibility, and reliance on spirit. And I will explain each one of those to you. Every person helps the circle function by assuming small increments of leadership that carry out the group's defined purpose. Rotating leadership doesn't mean the group is leaderless. It means the leadership passes among group members. The circle minimizes distinctions between teacher and learner, or boss and employee, for instance. Shared responsibility. Each person works to sustain a respectful environment. We pay attention by being aware of what we and other people need in terms of support. We think before speaking, take time to consider the consequences of actions, ask for help in setting directions we know will have long-term impact. We examine our own boundaries and help each other stay focused. Reliance on spirit. Each person places ultimate authority in the center and takes their place at the rim. The center becomes a symbolic place where everyone's willingness to listen dwells. You can call the center a sacred space or the heartbeat or even the group process. Circles invite us to connect with one another at a deeper level. Circles create a safe space for each of us to be real with one another and share our stories. Circles create a safe space where our stories are heard, respected, and acknowledged as wisdom. When someone calls a circle, we acknowledge that something that we have dealt with in isolation can be better handled in community from a sacred space and from the shared support of others. talking piece is an object that grants the person holding it the right to speak without interruption. I love this quote, so I added it to the slide. Imagine being in a circle when men and women allow each other to finish their thoughts without interrupting, where we listen to what is being said rather than planning rebuttal. When a talking piece is used in counsel, the person with the piece has the floor. The rest of us listen and trust that when it is our turn to speak, we will be able to draw forth the words we want. Now is time to pay attention to another member of the circle. And I just want to share my own personal experience with this. I am in my head a lot, and when I'm in conversation with someone, I'm typically thinking about what I'm going to say in response. It's not an easy practice for me to pay total attention to what the person is saying, but there's a magic that happens in a circle with a talking piece. Somehow, my brain does not do that. I never ever find myself thinking about what I'm going to say when that talking piece comes to me. There's some kind of sense of trust that you get in that circle when you become a part of it, that you will get the time you need when that piece comes to you. So I call it magic. Also, your talking piece should be something with some texture, so that when it does go around the circle and people feel it, the texture brings them into the moment of the circle. And it can be a talking piece of any kind. On the right, you'll see pictures of talking sticks. I had once as a talking piece a ceramic egg. It was beautiful, had nice texture, and I used that for years until it somehow disappeared. And whoever has the talking piece is the person who talks and is the person who is listened to. The holder of the talking piece can also choose silence and pass the piece on to the next person. However, it can also encourage a normally quiet person to contribute. Quiet people have valuable insights that are often lost in other forms of dialogue. And here's one more quote that is not on the screen. Once the piece is in hand, it tends to have the same impact as forming the circle itself. From somewhere inside, we remember what we are supposed to do next. A couple more definitions for you. Keeper of the circle is the person who opens the circle and sort of monitors the circle, just being aware of whether the guidelines are working or not. And then calling a circle. When we call a circle, we don't just pull chairs into a circle. Calling a circle is an intentional process that permits deeper connection. So to begin, when you call your circle, as I said, it's a very intentional process. You want to invite as many of the people that you've called or invited to the circle to help you set up the circle. Yes, you will pull the chairs together. You will start creating the center. There's an unusual quiet that happens while you're doing this. It just happens. So you'll need, after you pull the chairs together in a circle, you need a table to put in the center of the circle. That table should be shorter than the chairs, if at all possible. This one here that you see on the screen is the one that I have used for, I'm saying 30 to 35 years. I still have it. I took this picture for you. It is, and I measured it for you. This is 16 to 17 inches high. Somehow this one has been perfect all these years. So something that doesn't distract from your circle, but that draws your attention. You will need to place something in the center of your circle on the table. That can be a candle. It can be a vase of flowers. It could be a plant. It could be a vegetable. Whatever feels right for your group, that's what you can use. When I train nonprofits in my 8-week major gift campaign, one of the first parts of the training is to help board, staff, and volunteers articulate their passion for the mission in a compelling manner. This is the passion and voice they need to use when making an ask. The questions I ask in a circle for training to ask for major gifts can also be used in your beginning circles to create a storytelling culture. Some of those questions are on the next screen. Once you've set up your circle and everyone is seated, you'll start your circle by explaining the process. You'll explain the talking pieces you've learned in this video, making sure to remind them that it is only the person with the talking piece that speaks. Explain that each person will have enough time when the piece comes to them to think about the question before speaking if need be. You may choose to ask more than one question, but if you do, it is only one question at a time that goes all the way around the circle. That's called a round. Plus, if you have 10 or more people in your circle, you probably want it to, maybe just keep it to one, maybe 2 questions, depending on the time that you've got. Here are some of the questions I use when I train folks to make a major ask. This is in preparation for meeting with folks face to face. Another thing I like to do when I look at these questions is work with the people in the organization. Which questions do they like the best? Make sure that you share some of these questions with folks that will be participating, and which ones do they want to answer? What's the most comfortable? But you can see how these questions would draw on passion. What initially drew you to this organization and work? What resonated with you when you started? What personal connection do you have to the issue? What drives you to do the work? Why is it so important to you? What about it gives you energy each day? All good questions to choose from for creating a storytelling culture at your nonprofit. You made it. You're now ready to head on back to our Austin Nonprofit Meetup mini course on storytelling.